Listener-supported St. Gabriel Catholic Radio AM 820 brings you Family Sanctuary, a show that inspires living the gospel message in word and deed within our families. And now, Family Sanctuary with host Peggy Hartshorn.
Welcome to the Family Sanctuary, focusing on life-giving relationships and the family. I'm your host, Peggy Hartshorn, chairman of Heartbeat International, that advances life-affirming pregnancy health around the world. And today we have a program on family prayer, and we've been doing several programs on family prayer on the Family Sanctuary. You can search for other programs as well as this one, and it is so central to our faith, to our relationship with our spouse, to our relationship with our children, of course. And it gives us, well, our guest today uses the term, it helps us fight against spiritual starvation. What could be more vital than fighting against spiritual starvation? That's for sure. So I thank you, Greg Schutte, who's our guest today, for putting it in those terms. It makes it so important in our thinking, of course, that family prayer, couple prayer is absolutely vital. So our guest today, and I'll introduce him a little more completely here, Greg Schutte. There are other programs by Greg in our archives that I'm sure you would also find very, very valuable. Greg is a licensed independent social worker and marriage counselor. And he is now the director of Marriage Works Ohio, has been since 2008. That's a program that actually started within one of Heartbeat International's affiliates in Dayton, Ohio, Elizabeth's New Life Center. And that's how I know about Marriage Works and about Greg. So it's been a blessing to know you for quite a while, Greg, and your work. Greg is the author of a beautiful program called Discovering Our Deepest Desire, which is a Catholic curriculum for marriage enrichment. It's available in the Diocese of Cincinnati and also in the Diocese of Columbus. And Greg not only works very hard in Dayton, Ohio, promoting marriage in the secular community, but as well in the Catholic community. And he travels all over the United States, does teaching and training for couples who are getting involved in marriage programs in their parishes, also training people in discovering our deepest desire. So, Greg, we're happy that you could travel to Columbus today to be our guest on Catholic Radio here, St. Gabriel Catholic Radio. So, tell us, Greg, this term that you've used, fighting against spiritual starvation. Obviously, the urgency of prayer, the urgency of prayer in our couple relationship, in our families. Maybe it's obvious, but why do we need family prayer?
Well, I use that term starvation because it made me think of things just recently with my own kids, or myself. When I'm not eating and I'm so busy doing a lot of different things, all of a sudden you start feeling like something's not right. I'm not feeling real good. Oh, I haven't eaten. And you eat and you feel better. Same thing with drinking. A lot of times my kids will not drink and they end up dehydrating and they feel bad. So it's the same thing with prayer. We sometimes don't think about how important it is to have that connection with God. Life is so hard, and this whole marriage thing we can't do alone. I mean, we can try, but not successfully. And so prayer is this battle against this presumption of I can do it all myself, this self-sufficiency. And so we really want to encourage couples to do it together, because there's many reasons why that prayer is not just for them individually, but for them as a couple, and really feeding their marriage. And
absolutely. What I know that you think through these issues so completely, so fully. I love talking to you and having you on the program, because you've really you've really thought through, and of course, experience with the couples that you counsel, experience in your own married life. I think I forgot to say that you have been married to your wife, Stephanie, for 25 years.
Yep.
And you have 7 children from ages 8 to 23. So you've obviously experienced a lot of challenges in your married life. All couples have who have been married for probably no matter how long they've been married, but a long marriage, 7 beautiful children, working in the world with trying to encourage healthy marriage in a secular community as well as in the church. You really have faced these things personally and in your professional life as well. Yeah. So what are the things, even though I bet many people listening today would say, oh, I know prayer is important. I know we should be praying more. I believe that.
See, and that's
what's
the problem.
Keeping us from it?
Yeah, it's just a lot of this we should. And I experienced that in my own life where with my wife, it was her encouragement to really do more prayer and do more prayer together. And I think that's the beauty of marriage is really challenging each other to grow in that. But I suppose there are all kinds of excuses we use. I'm too busy. We'll start tomorrow. People are probably a little bit intimidated by it, praying together as a couple. Right.
Maybe does it seem too personal for a lot of couples to really reveal themselves that way?
Yeah, there's a lot of different things that cause people that angst in that. And so I first try and encourage people to think about it as communicating with your wife or your husband. If you didn't do it but every other day or once a week, how well would the relationship go? And so a lot of times we treat God that same way, where it's just, I know I should. Well, think about that if you did that with your wife. You can't build that relationship without that communication. Mm-hmm. And that's what prayer is. It's not one of those, extra things. So I've learned, and I try and teach couples this too, is that, prayer does many things for us. One is it helps us kind of prioritize life, to realize how God should be at the center. God has to be first. If God's not first, then, things are out of order and we'll start to see the effects of that.
It's so easy to forget that, isn't it? Because we're so busy with our jobs, the challenges of just normal life in this day and age.
Yeah. And I've experienced that personally, where God keeps trying to call me back because, a lot of times we can talk about God, but I love, I think it was Father John Riccardo talked about, it's one thing to live a good life. It's another to know God. I think we try so hard to live a good life, but we're not spending time just trying to really understand and have that depth of relationship with God. And from that can flow that relationship with our spouse.
And as you said when you first started the program, it's if we aren't in touch with God and God's grace in our lives and God's presence in our lives, then it's like we're trying to function without food, or we're trying to function without water. That's right. What really fills us up so that we can give love to those around us.
Right.
It doesn't come from us. The love does not come from us. It comes from God. If we're not being filled, we can't pour it out.
And that's why I use that whole starvation thing, because I want people to really get this mindset, because it's too easy to look at prayers being, I didn't get to reading my book. I didn't get to, I'll do it tomorrow. Versus understanding, no, this is like food. If you don't do it, you start to feel that hunger, and little by little it affects different things.
So you've seen, obviously, you and your wife have tried to prioritize prayer in your lives.
Yeah.
You've seen other couples, you work with couples all the time you're challenging to do that, and I'm sure they share with you some of the benefits. So let's talk about what happens when you do prioritize it. What are some of the positive things that you've noticed in your relationship and in the relationship of other couples?
Yeah. Well, it builds more of that unity, especially as a couple and in the family. One of the things that I've noticed is the more I pray with my wife, there is this unifying where we feel like we're working together towards all those things that are working against us. Mm-hmm. There's an intimacy that comes through prayer too, instead of just trying to do it on our own. And then there's there's more kind of direction to it, in a sense, because when you're praying together, there's an accountability that's built into that, which is very beautiful, and for some people can be intimidating. And that's where I really encourage and have to work with couples to get past that. They sometimes judge each other or feel inadequate, but that should draw us to go deeper. And let me give you an example. My wife, for the longest time, was praying from the Magnificat. And my prayers were just more sporadic at night. And I'd watch her do this, and I would see kind of that transformation in her life. And I kept thinking, I got to do that. I got to do that. So it went from me starting to pray the Magnificat, from the Magnificat, to us praying together. And we would do it in the morning and in the evening. And it, again, that unity started to build once I got past my, that's her thing, I'm doing my thing. So
that's interesting you mentioned that, because in the Magnificat, of course, they use part of the liturgy of the hours for the morning prayer and the evening prayer. And we also have another program in our archives on using the liturgy of the hours in couple prayer. So it's just another example of a type of prayer that couples can do together that just brings some beautiful benefits. And you've given a perfect example of that. And
the church has so many, it's so rich with different types of prayer. And I think that that's where some people don't know where to start. And I think that that's the beauty is that we have many different ways of praying. So some people like to pray more free-flowing, and that's great. But if that doesn't work for your marriage, there are set prayers, there are novenas, there are the rosary, things that you can do as a couple, and your intention being for your marriage, your family.
Right. And I think sometimes it's more safe, let's say, to start with set prayer, because many Catholics are more familiar with that type of prayer. And there's some beautiful, we've talked about apps that are available now, many apps that have, if you've forgotten those set prayers that you used to know, you can find them so easily, many different options for prayer books and apps, and just starting small. Start every morning, maybe over your cup of coffee, or when you go to bed at night with just a brief set prayer. And then, like you said, you gradually seeing the liturgy of the hours that your wife was doing, started into that mode, and now you found that you really like that.
Yeah. So the challenge is really helping couples to see this as a building of a relationship versus a checking of boxes.
Right.
I got to get my prayers in. I got to pray these things. How do I build that relationship? It's the same as building that relationship with your spouse. The other thing that's such a benefit from prayer is that it's tapping into those graces that God wants to give to us, especially through our marriage. The sacrament of marriage has this promise of grace that comes with it. And in some of the talks that I've done, I refer to this whole concept of, well, God wants to give us these graces. He's longing to give us these graces. I mean, he's just handing them out to us, and we're sitting there going, maybe not today. But I asked them, if you're at a grocery store and they said, in aisle 10, we're giving away free canned goods for the next 3 hours, all that you want, you would see this massive rush of people going over with carts and loading it up. And yet God's sitting here saying, got all this free grace. We're like, no, not right now. I think we need to, it's encouraging couples to see that this is part of the strength that helps our marriage, that gives us that. It doesn't mean that prayer takes away the problems. It just gives us the grace to endure and really walk through the things that we have to deal with in life. And I'll never forget a young lady who lost her husband early on, and my wife would commiserate for her, and she finally turned to her and said, this is my burden to bear. Don't try and bring this on yourself. When you go through these problems, God gives you the grace to go through these specific things.
But how do we tap into that grace? Through prayer. That's
right.
A beautiful point, Greg. Well, let me reintroduce you here today. Our program is on couple prayer, family prayer, and which Greg says is fighting against spiritual starvation, which is a beautiful way of thinking about it. Without it, we can become spiritually starved. And Greg Schutte is the director. He's a licensed independent social worker and marriage counselor. He's the director of the Marriage Works Program Ohio since 2008, which is based in Dayton, Ohio. And he is the author of a wonderful Catholic curriculum for marriage enrichment called Discovering Our Deepest Desire, which is available in the Diocese of Cincinnati as well as the Diocese of Columbus. And I believe you even said the Kalamazoo Diocese and maybe others now.
Yeah, Kalamazoo is really taking off with this. In fact, we're looking to get our Spanish version in there too.
Oh, wonderful. Well, if you want to contact Greg or find out more, he does have a website, ourdeepestdesire.com. And also you can find more about his program through the Diocese of Columbus Marriage and Family Life Office, which is columbuscatholic.org. And some of our listeners, Greg, may be saying, I wish our parish had some talks about these kinds of things or programs to help us in couple prayer, marriage enrichment. And that can happen.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Obviously. Talk to your priest, talk to your deacon, director of religious education, see what's available. And maybe God's calling you as a couple to try to introduce something more in your parish. What a beautiful challenge. And you would be the richer for it, obviously, as a couple. Yeah. Well, Greg, we've been talking about how really prayer is the source of the graces that God can provide for us, or does provide for us through the sacrament of marriage. So we need to take advantage of that. We've been talking about some of the why behind couple prayer and family prayer. It helps us prioritize putting God first in our life. It builds unity because it really is an intimate thing that a husband and wife can do together. And it builds that unity that you mentioned that in sharing our intentions. And
builds the unity in the family, too. And
Absolutely.
I think when we start with our kids young on, it becomes a way of life for them.
Yeah.
And a lot of times I'll say that to people is that, faith that is a way of life is harder for our kids to discard when they get out into the world than something that's just a sideline. Mm-hmm. I see my kids now going off to college, and what's important to them is praying and going to adoration and praying the rosary.
That's beautiful.
And you're sitting back going, wow, it does work. It's really cool. And it means something to them. It's not just a habit.
Mm-hmm. So. It's a legacy that you've provided for them for the rest of their lives. So what are some of the other things that you have noticed about the value of prayer for the couple and for the family?
Well, I talk about it recentering the soul. It can calm, focus, remind us of our help in God. I just had this last night where I was kind of panicking about quite a few things that are coming up in my days. And my wife just said, oh, no, she didn't even say. They were downstairs watching something. I'm sitting up just fretting in the room. And my daughter comes up and she's like, we're going to pray the rosary. Do you want to pray with us? I'm like, heck yeah, bring everybody up here. Because and I found that once we were praying, it didn't take the problems away. It just helped put it in perspective because I calmed down. I started to realize, and then I realized I'm not alone.
Right.
When we're doing too many people are trying to do life on their own. Mm-hmm. And it's not just doing it outside of, just God. It's trying to do it outside of everybody else. We don't want to burden anybody. Mm-hmm. And yet God gave us the family, gave us, our faith as a family to surround us and lift us up. Mm-hmm. And my wife was there going, how can I help? How can I help?
Isn't that beautiful?
So that it builds that unity, it builds that communication, and it builds that, I think it really helps us kind of recenter and just kind of calm down at times.
And what you've said, Greg, is so true, how we try to handle things alone. Husbands and wives independently of each other, independent of the family. We hate to burden other people. We don't. But the stresses today are so strong that we're facing, and particularly challenges with parenting, with all the horrible secular influences around them, with the screens, trying to protect them from all of the challenges to our faith.
Well, let me give you a little something here, because this is where my wife taught me something. Because a lot of times we don't think about the power of prayer, because sometimes we don't get the answer we want. But I think there's got to be those times when we see how it does work. Just my wife talks about this, where one of my kids got into something on the internet that they shouldn't have, but she had been praying for a long time for my children to really have the guidance of the Holy Spirit to know when to intervene. And the same day that this kid got involved in that, the Holy Spirit told my wife, "Go check on them." And she went in and caught it early. Mm-hmm. Whereas, again, it's not magic, but it was one where God, was leading us to this.
God answered her prayer.
Yeah, and so I've started to do this. I'm like, okay, if this works for her, and I ask God, please lead me to helping my kids when they need it.
Let me be there when they need it.
And I'm seeing it play out in many ways.
That's beautiful. So, Greg, I think another thing that you've shared that prayer, because we're talking about the darkness of the culture today, really can shine a light.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. It helps us see life in a different aspect, in a different way. And I think sometimes life can get so dark and we feel helpless and hopeless. And that's the beauty of praying together and working together. Is that it does, and especially understanding our faith together, because that has really helped me see things in a different light. I see, for many of us in the Catholic faith, we see the beauty of suffering. I mean, that's a hard concept to throw out there, but the deeper we go into our faith, we start to understand it can be a gift that we can use in our prayer. As a prayer, we often, offer up our sacrifices. One of the prayers me and my wife do for each other is we fast for each other every Wednesday. And that's a prayer for each other. It's a gift, but there's a sacrifice of suffering that comes along with that.
That's beautiful.
Now, something I want to add in here is kind of a disclaimer, because I'm sure that some people who are listening to this may say, their spouse may not be into prayer, or they just fight against it, or they want nothing to do with it. This doesn't mean that you shouldn't still pray. I encourage those individuals, the mother or the father that, may not be getting that support, to continue that prayer, to continue to pray for their marriage and their spouse. I love, again, in the Catholic faith, we have those saints who show that power, like Saint Nona and Saint Monica and Saint Rita, that there was this conversion in their spouse because of their faithful prayer and their example.
They didn't give up. They just kept praying.
Right. And that prayer also changed them to be more gentle with their spouse, which in turn created that opportunity for conversion. So.
Sure. Well, we have a few more minutes, Greg, just a few more minutes. How about some practicalities?
Sure. Yeah. Well, first of all, don't beat yourself up. All the time we'll set a goal for ourselves and we don't fulfill it, or we don't follow up and we beat ourselves up. Don't do that. Just keep trying, keep working at it. Make time for prayer, because if you don't make time, you just wait for time to happen, it's not going to happen. You have to make time, and there's so many opportunities throughout the day to do that. I also talk about utilize all possibilities, like, when you're driving, instead of cranking up the radio, listening to talk radio, turn it off for a while and use that time to pray and center on God, or the quiet time in the morning, praying before meals, after meals. Don't get frustrated with distractions. Sometimes we're praying as a couple, and all these thoughts just that we're struggling with, like last night with me, my head it still had it going through as we're praying the rosary, but I tried to rework that into praying for those areas of my life. And it changed them from being distractions to being a focus of, positive prayer. Like I said, utilize the standard prayers if you don't like the free-flowing prayers, but whatever works for you. And then utilize things like the rosary. We've been given some really neat gifts. Me and my wife pray the rosary every morning. Novenas, there's prayer books like the Magnificat, which is a beautiful guide in that. So make that time. Don't give up. Don't get discouraged by distractions, and really utilize the gifts that the church gives us that guides us in prayer.
Yeah. I think we've been talking too on some of our other programs, and you mentioned too, what we do is such a model for our children. Mm-hmm. I'm thinking about our family prayer when I was growing up. Every time we took a trip, and we traveled a lot, we were camping. We did that on weekends and so forth. We always started every trip with a rosary. We set it in the car. And that was so ingrained in me that now my husband and I, every time we head out, usually we're heading out to the airport now, not on a camping trip, but there's enough time actually between our house and the airport to say a rosary.
That's right.
And we do that.
Yeah.
And so the habits that we develop in our children, do definitely stick in many cases. It's so important to do that together.
And one last one is adoration. Go to adoration with your kids. Mm-hmm. You'll never regret it. So,
and of course, we haven't said, of course, Mass, well, obviously, and the sacrament of reconciliation. Doing things together as a couple or as a family, again, is going to build that unity and create that legacy for our family. So, well, our guest today has been Greg Schutte, and he is the director of Marriage Works Ohio and the author of Discovering Our Deepest Desire. Has a website, ourdeepestdesire.com, where you can find out more about his work, and his program is available through the Marriage and Family Life Office here in the Diocese of Columbus. So, Greg, thank you so much for being with us today. You are all listening to St. Gabriel Catholic Radio with archives on stgabrielradio.com under the Family Sanctuary. And we have many programs on couple relationship and several now on family prayer as well. We're streaming live on stgabrielradio.com, and our program is broadcast at 4 o'clock every Saturday and 2 o'clock on Sundays. So please join us again to strengthen our families and make them sanctuaries of life as God intends.
Family Sanctuary is a production of listener-supported St. Gabriel Catholic Radio, AM 820. Archives of Family Sanctuary with Peggy Hartshorn are available at stgabrielradio.com.